So when I was studying for the LSAT, that's the law school admissions test, and I can't recall exactly how long I studied for that test, but I'm thinking I studied minimum maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months. I walked around with my LSAT study guide for at least 6 months. Like everywhere I went, I had my study guide with me, and every spare moment that I had, no, I studied 3 to 6 months. Every spare moment that I had in between classes, or I was working, whenever I had a break, I would just open the book and I would go through, 4 or 5 or 10 study questions. And then at night, I would do questions. I would take the practice exams, for an hour at night. And that's how I studied, as one example. And in my studying for the LSAT, once again, that's the law school admissions test. That's the equivalent of the GRE for an MBA program, for admission to an MBA program, or the MCAT for doctors. And so I would take the exams, and then I would check my work. I would check the answer key to see how many I would get correct. And what I discovered in my taking of those practice exams is that there were certain questions that I came across that I was not certain of the answer, but I had an idea. Like, there would be like A, B, C, and D. I don't know if there ever were an E as a selection, but at the very minimum there was A through D. And I would be stuck between, is the answer A or C, or is the answer like B or C? Here, let's dig a little bit deeper. I found that there were at least 2 of those questions in every passage, and I believe there were 20 to 25 questions in each passage. Some passages would have 50, so there'd be 25 to 50 questions per exam, per section. Maybe 25 more appropriate. And there would inevitably be 2 to 3 of those questions that I would come across, and I would not be quite certain of the answer. I knew it was between A and C, or otherwise B and C, but my mind always led me to either select A or B. That's the way that I think. What I discovered is that these exams, these law school admission tests, which I learned is a microcosm of life, or the test that one must take in America, would inevitably lead you to a question in life on that test that would have me pondering as to what is the appropriate answer, because me, conditioned and nurtured, trained to think the way that I think, given my background. You know how we say some of the tests are culturally biased? I'm not saying that these tests were necessarily culturally biased, but what I'm saying is that my culture and my nurture and my way of thinking would lead me to believe the best or most appropriate answer would be A or B, but 2 or 3 of those questions in each passage, inevitably, I would get incorrect because the answer was not, or nor A nor B, rather, it was C. I'm saying that the people who designed or created the test, they think different than me. And it wasn't necessarily a wrong answer, because on many of the tests, they say, give me the best selection. So both answers could be correct, but C was the more appropriate or the best answer according to the proctor, if you will, or according to the people who created the test. The answer was C. This is what I had to learn to do. And I've coined this phrase, and one day I'll write a book, or at least a chapter on this concept. What I learned to do is first I learned to identify questions on the test. I'm going to stop right there. And I'm going to analogize, I made that up, what I'm saying to life. First and foremost, one must identify the questions that are posed in life. That's number one. Number two, once I learned to identify those questions posed on that test, I also acknowledged that although my background and my way of thinking, my culture, if you will, my conditioning, if you will, would lead me to select A or B, I knew that this test, for this test, the answer was C. I had to recondition myself to select an answer on the test that was not in alignment with what I instinctively and intellectually thought was the answer, which was A or B. And I had to condition myself and force myself, if you will, to learn to identify those questions, not only identify the question, but then to fight my own intellectual instinct and circle C despite my belief that the answer was A or B. And I call this a circle C moment. In life, there will be moments, there will be questions asked or posed of you that you must identify. And in light of the system or the society that we live in, given our background, given our intellectual predisposition, if you will, our learning, our nurturing, and our nature, we must learn to circle C. And that, people, is the quandary. That's the duality that we exist in. That's that Du Bois souls of black folk. Let's talk more about it. Let's talk about learning to circle C. We'll be right back.